I'm going to talk to you tonight about positive psychology. And I have two main goals. First of all is to present you to the field of positive psychology. And my second goal, and hopefully I can reach this goal, is make you fall in love with this field, the same way I did a few years ago. I'm going to talk about three main things tonight. First of all, what is positive psychology? How did I find my way into positive psychology? And why positive psychology is a good thing? Because we want to know what's good in it. First of all, positive psychology, founded back in 1998 by Marty Seligman. He was then the president of the APA, the American Psychological Association. It's a research-based field. We're not kumbayas. It's not a movement. We're not a group of cool people. It's all research-based field. In positive psychology, we ask two main questions. The first question is, what makes this life worth living? And the second question that we ask is, how can we make normal life more fulfilling? Good questions, huh? I'm going to briefly go on how do we work in positive psychology, and I'm going to try to simplify it as much as we can. In positive psychology, we study people's strengths. So what is strengths? Strengths is something that someone does better than how he does other things. So what we do is study people's strengths. And we have a lot of studies on how to do it. Because we believe in positive psychology, when a person does something that he's strong at, when a person practices his strengths on a daily basis, he does it more often, he does it in new ways, and he does it in different areas in life, he experiences more positive emotion. When people experience more positive emotion, they live the flourishing life. So first of all, we study the person's strengths, and then we use interventions. Now, for some of you, interventions might be associated with addiction and everything. In positive psychology, it's a little different. Because when we're intervening in positive psychology, it's an initiated act, or behavior, or a ritual that we suggest for the person that we're working with, and he practices it. So this is our intervention. So we find the person's strength, and then we use this intervention. What I do as a positive psychology practitioner, I guide people on how to use these strengths on a daily basis. So we found out what the person's strength is. Now strengths can be, we have a list of 24 strengths we came up with. Strengths can be zest, can be love of learning, can be open-mindedness, curiosity, creativity, and this is just a partial list of what strengths are. Now, each and every one of you has a list of all the 24 strengths. They just come in different levels. When people use their strengths on a daily basis, as an intervention, they do it more and more. They do what they're good at. They do what they're good at. They do more of it. They do more of it. They experience positive emotion. When people experience positive emotion, they live a more flourishing life. And what we do in positive psychology, what we want to aim to in positive psychology, is for people to flourish. Some of the topics that we study, and I think they're fascinating: courage, strength, optimism, happiness, well-being, achievement, flow, great perseverance, positive emotion, pleasure, and this is just a partial list of the topics that we study. A little bit about how did I find my way into positive psychology. It's my own story. It's sad and happy, but eventually it's happy, so it's all good. So I moved to the United States about 9 years ago. I was not planning to stay here. I was traveling here. I met a guy on a blind date, kosher, Jewish, Israeli, it's all good. And I fell in love with him, and I stayed. Now, I don't know what about you guys, but I think when people are moving from one state, to another country, they're immigrants. So for me, moving here was a process of immigration. And this process has introduced me with several questions and problems and issues that I've never had before. And I'm sure some of you, the Israelis, or even people who moved here from other states in the United States, you know what I'm talking about. So, I had issues of isolation. I felt lonely. I needed to learn a new language, to run my life in a new language. I had no social connections. And I have problems of identity, like, so who am I now? I'm not Israeli anymore, so what do I do? Where do I belong? What does it mean? So forth. So then I sunk into depression. I was functioning and everything, I was working, but I just had this ongoing spiral in my mind of just negative emotions that it just wouldn't let me go. So I said, I'm gonna go to therapy. I love therapy, I'm a big believer in therapy, and I learned a lot about myself. I learned about my weaknesses, I learned about my issues, I learned pretty much to get to know myself. I loved therapy so much that I stayed there for 5 years. So when I started therapy, I was extremely miserable. And when I finished therapy after 5 years, I was less miserable. So in 5 years, all I could come up with is to be less miserable. I wasn't happy. I wasn't even close to being happy. I just had less negative emotions. Now, I'm Israeli, and I don't like not to be in control, and I don't like when I'm coming to situations that I'm like not comfortable and I'm miserable. Miserable is not my thing. So I said, you know what? There's something out there, I believe, that can work better for me, because okay is not enough. Because if all life has to offer is just being okay, then I was rightfully depressed before. So, okay. So I said, I'm gonna research a little bit about it, and that's where the first time when I encountered the term positive psychology. So all of a sudden, I was asked questions like, I read about questions like, what are you good at? What are your best character traits? What is it that you do that makes you excited, puts you in flow? What makes you happy? And I was reading all these questions and I was like, I don't have any answers. No one ever asked me, what am I good at? And then I said to myself, Israeli, ego thing. I'm going to find answer to each and every one of these questions. I'm going to make sure that I have an answer to each and every one of them. So something that started as like a momentary ego thing had turned into my field of studies. And this field of studies, I went and earned my master's in positive psychology, became my job, and then my career, and then my calling. So I want to tell you one thing about calling. People have careers, people have jobs, people have their goals, they want to earn a better salary, they want to get promoted and everything. And when they get to this point, they're kind of done. They did their thing. A calling is something that someone does regardless of when he's working or not. He does it all the time. He'll do it for no money. He just does it all the time. And this is what I do with positive psychology. I practice it all the time. I breathe it. I act in a positive psychology manner. It became my second nature. And it transformed my life forever. So as part of my calling, I have an office in Sherman Oaks where I work with individuals and I work with couples. And I'm honored to be a part of seeing people transitioning their life for the better. It's fascinating. So this is a little bit about how did I find my way into positive psychology. Now, why positive psychology? Jewish people we're very suspicious. We're like, okay, you want to offer me something? Yeah, why? What's good about it? So a little bit about what's good in positive psychology. First of all, traditional psychology is what we all know as, the day-to-day psychology, the mental illness psychology and everything. Put so much money and effort and studies in the past 60 years to treat human suffering. And the progress that we made in social science studying people's suffering was amazing. I mean, we could locate and we could identify mental illness, find some drugs for it, some medications for it, treat some of it, which is a big achievement for this field. Now, for a moment, just think about all the money, the time, and the minds that were put in to study human suffering. What if we take all these sources, all these resources, and put them into study human strength? What kind of achievements can we get as individuals, in our families, in our communities, in our countries, and so forth? Another thing in positive psychology, and what is it a good thing, is we study strength and we study optimism. Now, how many of you are optimistics? Not too many, Jewish people. We're not very optimistic. Okay, keep your hands up. How many of you are dealing with stress sometimes? It happens. More hands, huh? How many of you are dealing well with this strength? Yeah, come on. Okay. I want to give you a few examples about people who are optimistic, but before I give you an example, why is it worthy to be optimistic, I want to tell you one thing. Not everyone is born optimistic. Optimism is an acquired skill. Just for you to know, even if you're not born optimistic, you can become more optimistic. Why do you want to become more optimistic? Here's why. Here's some of the findings about optimistic people. They do deal better with stress. They get married and stay married for much longer. This is a good one. They make more money, they earn better incomes, they are healthier. If they get ill, they bounce back better from it. They suffer less from heart attacks and from strokes, and they live longer. Their social connections are much closer, happier, more intimate. That's one of the things that helps them stay optimistic. And they're happier. They're much happier people. So this is another reason why we want to become more optimistic. Another thing that we want to know about positive psychology and why is it a good thing is the prevention versus prescription. You know what traditional psychology does today is trying to find cure to mental illnesses, trying to find cure to depression, obesity, cardiovascular disease. They're good at it, but that's what they're trying to do. Find medications, prescribing medications for an already existing situation. But positive psychology has another aspect of how to look at it. Because we believe that if we show people, if we guide people, if we teach people how to live their lives better, how to lead their lives based on their strength, they're not going to be as depressed. And they're not going to turn into food. They're not going to become obese. And then they're not going to suffer from cardiovascular disease as much as they are now. So what we're suggesting is to educate people on how to live their lives better. Then we won't get to these epidemics appearing in such large scales. So we cannot eliminate it, but by helping people to live their lives better, then maybe we can prevent some of these diseases to arise. One last thing about why. Because positive psychology gives you choice. And the knowing that you have a choice gives you power, gives you freedom. So one option that you can do about your life is to be driven by the past. What does it mean? Some things have happened to me in the past, and some of them were hurtful, and this is how I feel about them, and these are the emotions that they evoke, so this is how I react. This is how I act right now, based on past events. This is called to be driven by the past. Another option is to stand in another place and to be strong enough and optimistic enough to envision a better future for yourself. And when you do that, you're being drawn by the future. So you can be driven away by the past, or you can be drawn by the future. It's your choice. One last thing, we gotta be practical. It is called the 3 blessings, and it's something that I would like each and every one of you to do at home for the next 3 weeks. Every night before you go to bed, 3 blessings. What does it mean? Before you go to bed, think about 3 good things that happened to you today. Just 3. It can be very, very simple. The range is very, very wide. Whatever is meaningful for you. Whether you had a good cup of coffee in the morning, whether you had, you got a smile from your mailman, it made you feel a little good. You snuggled a little bit with your cat, it made you feel good. That's good enough. If it's something larger than, a meaningful conversation with a colleague, or you got promoted, or you got engaged, this is also something meaningful. So whatever makes you feel better, I want you to mention it to yourself. Because we believe that putting a focus on the good things rises the life. That's what it does. So 3 good things every night before you go to bed. You can either list them or just tell yourself. If you do it in the next 3 weeks, I can guarantee you one thing, you'll feel much better and you're going to thank me. For the next month, for the next 3 months, and for the next 6 months. The more you do it, the better levels of optimism you're going to experience. So I want to thank you for your time and for your patience. Thanks a lot.